class. So I wanted to show you that first of all, the dog that we were working on last time is not set up yet, but when it does, I do need to poke a hole into this animal to make sure that it will not explode in the kiln, because clay shrinks and there's moisture inside, and when that pressure builds, it will find an escape route if you don't give it one. It doesn't have to be a huge hole. It can just be about that size, or in the case of the turtle, just underneath the shell. It just has to be big enough for that vapor to leave. So make sure that you poke a hole in. I'm going to now show you how to make a bird, and I'm starting with the same hunk of clay, not same hunk, but same size, about 4 or 5 inches by several inches thick. And what I'm going to do again is I'm going to start out with the general shape. And I am going to pinch up the head and the tail. And when I build this, I'm going to go in mostly through the stomach. So again, I'm going to go in, and I'm not making the bird's legs. I think I'll make this one without legs. It's just, I could have a couple and then use the tail as a tripod, but I feel like for you, having to transport your work back to school, it could make it very fragile and vulnerable, and it could crack and break off. So I think the more things we have in one piece, the better. All right, so right now what I'm doing is I'm hollowing this out so that it is less, or around, close to, or less than 1/4 inch. Less than is hard because then it's really hard to smooth the clay. So you don't want to go too thin, but it should be thin enough. All right, pinching, and then I can't really get my fingers aren't long enough to get into the head. So I'm going to start by taking my needle tool, the blunt side, and ramming it in there, and then getting my finger in there. It's all I really need to pinch with is a finger. And I just want to make sure this is hollowed out. I don't have to make the beak yet, but I can just get the start of it. And then out here, I need to close this back off because that's going to hold the shape while I make everything else. All right, so I'm going to take my paddle, and I'm going to paddle very gently inward to try to close this off. And remember that air, just like we saw with the dog sculpture, that air is going to hold the shape. Until I can model it and make it everything I want it to be. Now, this is going to be a hard one to completely close up on its own, so I am just going to make another little patty, tiny little one. I'm just going to wet this side and add this on. I'm going to smooth. So I could make this bird as a stand-up bird or a wall sculpture, depending on what I want. But if I make it as a wall sculpture, I will need to add in a keyhole in the back. And that is so that it can hang on a nail. So kind of keep that in mind if you make it for that purpose. But still make it so that we can fire it pretty easily. Okay, so this is the start of my bird. Now, using my finger, which is the side of my thumb, I'm going to smooth the clay to make that head have a little bit better shape. All right. And I'm just going to kind of smooth that a bit. The beak is just not in the right spot, so I just push it down, and it's getting a little bit better. Maybe the beak is too big, or I don't like it, the shape of it right now, but that just means I have to work on it a little bit. All right, now for the eye. I'm actually going to move the clay up. I'm not removing the clay or adding it on as much as moving the clay on the surface. And the reason that works so good is I feel like I have less chance for it to crack in that spot. Every time I add clay on, especially if you are working from home, we have a greater chance of having something come back off. All right, so this is a good start to the bird head. I'm going to use my rib on the outside here. And then just want to smooth this out. Even though the bird is going to have a texture, I want it to be a texture that I made. And then what I'm going to do for the tail is I'm going to kind of pull a handle, kind of. So I'm going to get my hand wet and just kind of pull that right off of there. I'm going to create kind of a pulled handle, but it's a tail for my bird. Still am not in love with that beak. Now, for the wings, I know a lot of people like to add things on, but this is not necessary. You can actually mark off where you might want that wing, just using your finger, kind of like a drawing tool, and then you can press in around it. That's going to make it pop out without adding any clay on. I'm going to do the same thing, hopefully in the same spot on the other side. We'll see. Might be a little bit big, but you can always erase it. You're just rubbing it with your finger to change it, like where I have those silly little wrinkles, and I can get rid of it. Then I can work in here to create the wings, feathers, like whatever I want to do, I can kind of work in that. And that just gives me a template for when I go to paint. Now, if I want to turn this into a candle holder, I could do that pretty easily. If I want it one side to be against the wall, like I said before, I'd have to choose a side, maybe flatten it a little bit, add in the keyhole, and then I could have that on a wall. But if I think for this one, I don't want to do that. So I'm going to set this. It's going to get flat if I leave it in one spot like this, but I did want to show you how to make a little taper candle holder, candlestick. I'm just going to roll a little coil, flatten that rim, roll it again, flatten again, and I kind of work back and forth, rolling and flattening that top to try to make it rounded. I'm going to set Birdie aside. This is looking better, and it does take a little work. Don't just start with some ill-shaped hunk of clay. You want to shape it first and have it be, it's called a taper, so obviously it's going to be bigger on top and it's going to taper towards the bottom. I'm going to take my needle tool and I'm going to get it wet, and I'm going to put that into the center, and I'm going to roll that on a surface. And what that does is it opens it. And it opens it wide enough where I can work with it just a little bit more. Maybe I have to move it down. And then it's opening a little bit more, but it's still not open enough because remember that clay shrinks, and that would be a problem. If it's too small, it doesn't fit a candle in it. I'm going to fix that lip, and that looks like a pretty good size even with shrinkage. Now, the one thing I know also about my bird is that the back is angled. So I want to always match that angle. So I'm going to cut that same angle, and then I'm going to round this out, add a little water so I can make some slip on the surface, and then I'm going to press that on. And that way my candle holder will be kind of sitting upright. If I want, and I do, I can put a tiny supporting coil on. And I'm just going to really smooth that on. And that's just going to give it a little bit more stability, because I'm always thinking about what it's like to transport your work during these weird times to school and trying to keep it as safe as possible. All right. And I know many of you have been sending me messages about how you're breaking your work. Not many, a few. And so just remember to treat everything as carefully as possible. Like, you would never want to pick up a bowl by its rim, or pick up a dry cup by its handle. That is never, ever a good idea. You want to always kind of pick it up with 2 hands really carefully. This is the start to my bird. I'm going to underglaze it eventually, but for now, I want you to know that when this hits leather hard, you'll take your needle tool, you will poke it in, and you will wiggle it around a little bit so you get a hole. The hole doesn't have to be huge. It just has to be big enough that the air can escape, the moisture can escape. All right. Thank you.